That night, in the NBC studio, television history experienced its quietest 60 seconds. The cameras were rolling, the lights were warm, the audience was seated, and Johnny Carson, the man who had filled 30 years of American nights with laughter, stopped talking. He didn't pause for effect. He didn't set up a punchline. He simply stopped. And in that silence, something happened that no script, no producer, and no network executive could have ever planned. His hand hovered over a small white envelope resting on his desk. The band behind him, usually ready with a sting or a flourish, sat motionless. Doc Severinsen held his trumpet like a question he didn't know how to ask. Ed McMahon, seated to Johnny's right, leaned forward slightly, his smile gone, replaced by something closer to concern. The studio audience, conditioned by decades to laugh on cue, didn't know what to do. So they did nothing. They waited. And the silence grew heavier. But to understand why Johnny Carson stopped, we have to go back 6 hours earlier, to a moment no one in that studio knew about. It was a Tuesday, October 1981. The show was running like it always did, smooth, professional, predictable. Johnny arrived at NBC's Burbank studios around 4 p.m., the same time he'd arrived for years. He walked past the same security guard, nodded to the same production assistants, poured himself the same cup of coffee. Routine was his religion. Routine kept the chaos of live television at bay. But that afternoon, his assistant handed him something that wasn't routine. A letter. Handwritten. No return address. Just his name on the front, and below it, in smaller letters. Please read this before tonight's show. Johnny took it to his dressing room. He didn't open it right away. He had a monologue to review, guests to prepare for, a show to build. But the envelope sat there on his desk, next to his cue cards, quiet and insistent. Finally, 10 minutes before airtime, he opened it. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. The words were simple. They began, "Mr. Carson, you don't know me. But you saved my son's life." Johnny read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed it in his jacket pocket. He walked onto the set. The theme music played. The audience applauded. Ed introduced him with the usual energy. And Johnny smiled, waved, and began his monologue like he had done thousands of times before. But tonight was different. Because halfway through a joke about politics, Johnny stopped. He looked down at his desk. Then he looked up at the audience. And for the first time in 30 years, he broke the fourth wall, not with a wink or a smile, but with something much more vulnerable. "Folks," he said quietly, "I need to do something I don't usually do." The audience laughed nervously, unsure if this was part of the bit. Johnny shook his head slightly. The laughter stopped. Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope. He held it up, not for the cameras, but as if he were showing it to himself. His voice, usually so steady, carried a slight tremor. "I got this letter today," he said. "And I think I need to read it to you." Ed McMahon straightened in his chair. The band exchanged glances. In the control booth, the director's hand hovered over the commercial break button, unsure whether to cut away. But something in Johnny's tone told everyone to wait. To listen. Johnny opened the envelope again. He unfolded the letter slowly, almost reverently. And then he read, "Mr. Carson, you don't know me. My name is Eleanor. I'm writing to you from a hospital in Ohio. My son, Michael, is 14 years old. 2 months ago, he tried to take his own life." The studio went completely silent. Not the silence of anticipation, but the silence of collective breath held. Johnny paused. He looked up briefly, then continued. "The doctors saved him. But when he woke up, he wouldn't talk. Not to me. Not to his father. Not to anyone. He just stared at the ceiling. We didn't know if we'd ever get him back. Then one night, a nurse turned on the TV in his room. Your show was on. And for the first time in weeks, Michael smiled. Johnny's hand holding the letter lowered slightly. He swallowed. The camera held on his face. No cutaway, no wide shot. Just Johnny, alone with 60 million people watching. He started watching you every night, Johnny read. At first, he just smiled. Then he laughed. Then, one night, he turned to me and said, "Mom, do you think Johnny Carson ever feels sad?" And I realized, my son was coming back to me. Because of you. Because you made him remember that it's okay to laugh, even when everything hurts. Johnny stopped reading. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back on his desk. He didn't look at the camera. He looked at the audience. And when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Eleanor, if you're watching. Michael, if you're watching. I want you to know something." He paused. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It was sacred. "I don't have all the answers. I never have. I'm just a guy who tells jokes on TV. But if this show, if these stupid jokes and silly sketches, if they helped you even a little bit, then that's the only thing that's ever really mattered. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." The audience didn't applaud. Not yet. They were still caught in the gravity of the moment. Johnny reached for his coffee mug, took a sip, and set it down with a soft clink. Then he looked directly into the camera. "Life is hard," he said. "It's hard for everybody. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just keep going. Keep showing up. Keep trying. And if you need help, ask for it. There's no shame in that. None." He let those words hang in the air for a moment. Then, slowly, a small smile returned to his face. "No," he said, his voice lightening just a little. "I believe we have a show to do." The band started playing. The audience erupted in applause, not the polite, rhythmic clapping of a TV audience, but something deeper, louder, more real. Ed McMahon wiped his eyes quickly, pretending to adjust his microphone. Doc Severinsen nodded once, respectfully, and lifted his trumpet. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. After the show ended, Johnny didn't go to his dressing room. He walked straight to the production office and asked for Eleanor's contact information. The network had strict policies about viewer correspondence, but Johnny didn't care. He sat down at a desk, pulled out a piece of NBC stationery, and wrote a letter by hand. "Dear Eleanor and Michael," it began. "Thank you for trusting me with your story. I don't know if I deserve the credit you're giving me, but I'm grateful beyond words. Please know that you're not alone. And Michael, keep laughing. Keep fighting. The world needs you in it." He signed it, sealed it, and handed it to his assistant. "Make sure this gets mailed tonight," he said. Then he went home. The next morning, the press went wild. Every major newspaper ran the story. "Carson breaks down on air. The night Johnny got real." But Johnny refused to do interviews about it. He didn't want to turn Eleanor's pain into a publicity moment. He simply said in a brief statement, "It was the right thing to do. That's all." 3 weeks later, another letter arrived. This time, it was from Michael himself. It was short, written in the uneven handwriting of a teenager still finding his footing. "Mr. Carson, thank you for reading my mom's letter. I'm doing better now. I started going to therapy. It's hard, but I'm trying. And I still watch your show every night. You make me feel like it's okay to be sad and okay to laugh at the same time. I think that's the most important thing anyone's ever taught me." Johnny kept that letter in his desk drawer for the rest of his career. He never read it on air. He never mentioned it publicly. But every night, before he walked onto that stage, he would open the drawer, glance at it, and remember why he was there. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Years later, after Johnny retired, Michael reached out again. He was in his 30s now, married, with a daughter of his own. He sent Johnny a photograph of his family, along with a note that simply said, "I made it. Thank you." Johnny framed that photo. It hung in his home office, right next to his Emmys and Peabody's. Because for all the accolades, all the awards, all the nights of laughter, that photo was the one that reminded him what it all meant. The envelope from that October night in 1981 stayed with Johnny for the rest of his life. He never threw it away. When he passed away in 2005, his family found it among his personal effects, carefully preserved in a small wooden box. Inside the box was a note in Johnny's handwriting. "Never forget why we do this." That night in the NBC studio, when Johnny stopped talking and started listening, he didn't just change one boy's life. He changed what television could be. He showed millions of people that it was okay to be vulnerable. That strength didn't mean never breaking down, it meant breaking down and getting back up. The Tonight Show would go on for another 11 years after that night. Johnny would tell thousands more jokes, interview hundreds more guests, and make countless more people laugh. But ask anyone who was there that night, in the studio or at home, and they'll tell you the same thing: the quietest 60 seconds were the ones they'll never forget. Because in a world that never stops talking, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop, listen, and remind someone that they're not alone. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Television has given us countless memorable moments. Iconic interviews. Historic broadcasts. Viral clips. But very few have reminded us of something we often forget, that behind every camera, every screen, every laugh track, there are real people. People who hurt. People who struggle. People who need to know that someone, somewhere sees them. That night, Johnny Carson didn't just host a talk show. He held space for pain. He acknowledged fear. And in doing so, he gave a 14-year-old boy a reason to keep going. Eleanor later said in a rare interview, "I don't know why I wrote that letter. I just knew that if anyone would understand, it would be him. And I was right." Michael, now a father himself, has said, "Johnny Carson taught me that you don't have to be okay all the time. You just have to keep showing up. That's the lesson I'm teaching my kids now." The envelope. The letter. The 60 seconds of silence. These became symbols of something larger than television. They became proof that connection, real, human connection, can happen anywhere. Even under studio lights. Even on live TV. And that's the legacy Johnny Carson left behind. Not just the jokes. Not just the interviews. But the reminder that sometimes, the most unforgettable moments are the quietest ones. The moments when we stop performing and start being human. In the years that followed that October night, letters began arriving at NBC by the thousands. People from all walks of life sharing their own stories of struggle and survival. They all said the same thing. "Thank you for showing us it's okay not to be okay." Johnny never read these letters on air again. He didn't need to. That one moment had shown America that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was the most honest form of strength. After that night, something changed in Johnny. There was something softer in his eyes now. A deeper attention when guests spoke. A willingness to let silence exist without rushing to fill it with a punchline. The envelope became a talisman. On difficult days, Johnny would open his desk drawer and look at it. Not to read it again, he had those words memorized, but to remember that this job mattered in ways he couldn't always see. Michael grew up to become a therapist specializing in teenage depression. In every session, he kept a framed photo on his desk, a still from that Tonight Show episode. When patients asked about it, he would tell them the story and say, "If Johnny Carson can be brave enough to be vulnerable in front of 60 million people, you can be brave enough to be vulnerable with me." Eleanor, Michael's mother, never stopped watching The Tonight Show. Even after Johnny retired, she would watch reruns, and every time that October 1981 episode aired in syndication, she would record it. She kept dozens of VHS tapes of that single episode, each one carefully labeled, "The Night Johnny Saved My Son." When Johnny passed away in 2005, Michael attended a public memorial in Los Angeles. He brought the framed photo with him. And when it was his turn to place flowers at the memorial, he also left a note. It read, "You taught me that saving someone's life doesn't always look like what we think it should. Sometimes it looks like 60 seconds of silence. Sometimes it looks like someone simply saying, "I see you. Thank you for seeing me." That note was later found by Johnny's son, who had it framed and placed next to the original envelope in Johnny's personal archives. The two artifacts now sit together in the Library of Congress, part of the Tonight Show collection. Museum visitors often stop at that exhibit longer than any other. They read Eleanor's letter. They read Michael's note. And then they stand there, quietly, understanding that they've just witnessed something rare, proof that one moment of authentic human connection can ripple across decades. The legacy of that 60 seconds extends beyond television history. It changed how late-night hosts approached their craft. David Letterman once said in an interview, "After watching what Johnny did that night, I realized that our job isn't just to make people laugh. It's to make them feel less alone." Jimmy Fallon keeps a copy of the episode in his dressing room. Stephen Colbert has cited it as the moment that taught him the power of shutting up and listening. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the viewers themselves. That night, millions of Americans learned that their pain wasn't something to hide, that their struggles weren't signs of weakness, that asking for help wasn't shameful, it was human. And they learned it from the most unlikely teacher, a talk show host in a suit, holding an envelope, choosing honesty over entertainment.